filmed that yet. Just reboot.
I can cut it out later.
Okay.
I'll send you a masterpiece and then you can tell me how to edit this down.
I'm ready to start talking. Well, as many of you are aware, there's been quite a movement in our society to move towards grass-fed, locally raised animals as sources of meat and also vegetables. And this is kind of a conservative point of view. It appeals to the libertarian. It appeals to the anti-corporatist approach to food production. But I don't want to go into that. I just want to explain that here at the Rockin' M, we've been following this for years, the idea of grass-fed feed.
Do you eat corgis?
What?
Corgis.
No, not grass-fed corgis, but grass-fed, actually beef substitute. And so I want to kind of show you how our production facilities work here at the Rockin' M. So first I'm going to show you my room where I keep my harvesting tools. This is known as the man cave. Just follow me in here.
Come on, buddy, in here. That is one cool door.
Well, that's part of our good tissue practices. First, I want to show you a variety of tools that I use to harvest our homegrown beef. My favorite, which is kind of back here in the back. Let's see. Let me make some room. This is my Winchester Model 70. This is what I hunt with. You probably figured out when I'm talking about venison here. But while we're on the subject, I've laid a few things out here. Talk about some things that are military-style weapons. Obviously, the bayonet isn't very good for butchering. But we'll lay this down here. So there's been a lot of talk about military-style weapons. This is you notice the first thing that one should do when they pick up a gun is pull the bolt out. That's so everybody knows this is unloaded. This is a military-style weapon. This is a 1944 Mauser used by the Germans in World War II. It has the Mauser action that was invented before World War I. So I think everybody agrees. You can look at this, whether you know anything about guns, and say, yeah, that's a military-style weapon. But here's where it gets complicated. This Winchester Model 70, which looks like a deer rifle, not a military-style weapon. The problem is that the bolt action, this fundamentally the same action, has this obviously military-style weapon. So if there was a scope on this, it would be a sniper gun. If there was a scope on this would be a tool for harvesting grass-fed natural beef, aka venison. So you see how terminology can be very confusing. Let's show another military-style weapon. And this is the Garand, M1 Garand. This was used by our forces in World War II and the Korean War, which had a major role in us defeating fascism. So while a military-style weapon in communism, well, we didn't really defeat communism in Korea, but definitely World War II, the anti-fascist war. So one might say that this is a relic of the most successful anti-fascist war in the 20th century. Hardly a thing of evil. Now, this is a Glock, which is carried by an awful lot of police departments. Now, the interesting thing about the Glock is that we think, well, okay, the police carry this. Well, I don't think that makes it evil. But in terms of military-style weapons, this was designed for special forces in Europe, and it has a two-stage military trigger that allows you to shoot it as fast as a machine gun, if you're trained. So, again, military-style weapon put to good use today, protecting you all across America. Well, I think that kind of covers that right now. Well, let's move on to another aspect of what it means to be homegrown. I'm going to come back later and put these away. So if you follow me through the good tissue processing door here.
Whoa, thunder, can you believe that? So would you mind explaining the good tissue processing door?
It's a joke. This is a darkroom door. It makes the point that when you process things, it needs to be done properly. Keep things clean, keep the dust out. If it's airtight, I figure it's dust-proof. Because the last thing you want is for your grass-fed meat harvesting tool to get jammed up and cause you to make a bad shot and wound or maim your grass-fed animal. So here we are in the actual place where I process the meat and do the butchering myself in order to make sure that the meat's fresh and good for eating. So this is, I forget the name of this thing, but we hang the deer and we skin them and do all the other things to get the meat ready for storage. So by doing this, I can guarantee that the meat is fresh, and when it goes in the freezer, it is primo, the best stuff. And we try to use everything. For example, the scraps, the stuff that's not edible, say it's bruised or something like that, I've been saving for a friend for dog food. So we try to use everything we can. This is our meat grinder. This is our meat saw that we keep clean with pouring with bleach wipes, etc. This is my refrigerator for hanging the quarters. And you can see we're between seasons. This is my non-frost-free freezer, which I had to defrost, getting ready for the next season. This is about to get empty. So, but in the process, I did find some meat that I'd frozen undated three or 4 years ago, which kind of slipped by me, and I realized, this meat needs to be disposed of. But it's always good to feed the animals. So we're going to take this to the last step of our process, where we put out the parts that we don't need for our buzzer population. And we're going to walk across the field over there to the other side.
And what is the role of the buzzard in this
it supports a
food chain?
It supports a healthy ecosystem. By the way, I shoot almost entirely axis deer, which don't belong here. They're not indigenous. And so biologically, from a well-ordered ecosystem unaffected by man, removing as many of the axis from the ecosystem as possible is a very green and appropriate thing to do. Because after all, in the hill country, we want to prevent overgrazing, which is very important. One of the reasons why we have so much cedar, one of the reasons why we have water problems in the hill country is because we have so much cedar. That's the philosophy of our wildlife management program here at the Rocky Inn.
Have you been able to estimate the population?
A lot more. Remember, our place is pretty small, so we have a lot of deer that travel through.
And how many of those would you say that you shoot?
I shoot enough axis such that we don't buy beef, and thus by living off the land, we in effect have found a way to have healthy meat, good meat, it's very lean, and not support the corrupt meat industry.
What are some of the main things that you would say describe the meat industry as being corrupt?
Well, the enormous numbers, the unnatural way they're raised in pens, the methane they produce. I think if more people visited meat processing packs, we'd have a lot more vegetarians. I'm just alluding to the fact that there are an awful lot of people that believe the cattle industry is corrupt. But I think you'll agree that raising animals just for purpose of killing there's something kind of weird about that. And it's something that meat eaters overlook. Like the famous ad, how we should buy all our meat in grocery stores where no animals are killed. This is the boneyard. And this is where I deposit the bones and that sort of thing. We'll probably go to feed hogs and that sort of thing, which we don't like. But someday we're going to have a hog track, probably in this end of the field here, where we can catch hogs and have them sent off to meat processors. Because that apparently seems to be a real popular staple. Yeah, it's a shame that I wasted. I forgot that was in the freezer. It was supposed to be an enormous pot of chili about 3 years ago. But again, the point of this film or video or whatever this is, we're open and honest about what we do here at the Rocky Mountain. We're about transparency. What I want to point out to you, you see this grass right here? This is side oats grama. It looks like oats and it grows on the side. This is a natural prairie grass that we planted. What you see out here is a restored prairie as opposed to an overgrazed field filled with rocks that we found when we bought the property. So you're starting to get a hint of what the hill country should look like. Now, do you see this grass down here? If it wasn't for overgrazing by all the axis, the grass would be this high. And we planted our same mixture in our yard away from the deer, and sure enough, it would grow this high. So what you're seeing is the effects of overgrazing from these non-indigenous animals known as axis. So axis hunting brings together a number of disciplines, all of which is very green, requires skill and talent to be an effective hunter. It requires skill and some degree of talent to process your meat safely and effectively so that you have good quality meat. And altogether, it brings together a much healthier ecosystem, which I think is the goal that all of us would like to see for the entire world. So I think the Rocky Mountain Ranch is an example of how we think the world should be. Open spaces, guns, hunting, healthy meat.
So for the people who live, per se, in an apartment or just have a small house, then how do they fit into this view of having a green ecosystem that feeds people?
Well, see, that's really a question for the green movement that wants to force people into this lifestyle, which is actually very Jeffersonian in its origins.
Force people into this lifestyle?
Yeah.
For people to be essentially self-sufficient in terms of meat, right? Most people are still going to buy meat at the store. We won't even mention like McDonald's, okay? But
right. But see, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
If the world were proper, and if all things were in balance, and the world was put to rights, we wouldn't have cities with people that have no choices about where they got their food. The problem is you can't bring the kingdom into play through laws. And that's where progressivism fails. Because everything that I've described, especially the guns part, progressives hate. But when you go into, say, a central market or, the places that sell the homegrown, grass-fed meat, you're not going to see people that are in unions. You're not going to see the working classes. You're not going to see the remnants of America's middle class. You're going to see wealthy liberals and people with money who think that they're doing good. But all I can do is...
Well, you won't see me. I can't afford it, mostly.
Exactly my point. A struggling academic.
Well, now I would describe myself more as lazy and content.
lazy and content teaching your students to speak the language of communism.
Well, that might be Aramaic or something, the language of communism, but that's probably a discussion for another day.